effect. It's one that's full of just immeasurable human suffering, but it's like a way to start over.
We're clearly the apex predator on the planet. And I Googled something the other day, what's the most common form of mammal life on the Earth?
By number of organisms?
Count.
By count.
And the answer that came back was human beings. I was shocked. I couldn't believe it, right? It says apparently if we're just looking at mammals, the answer was human beings are the most common, which was very interesting to me. I almost didn't believe it, but I was trying to, 8 billion or so human beings.
It's a lot.
There's no other mammal that's got more than 8 billion. If you walk through downtown Edinburgh and Scotland and you look up on this hill and this castle up on the hill, and you talk to people and the story is, oh yeah, well that was a British castle before it was a Scottish castle, before it was a Pict castle, before it was a Roman castle, before it was some other Celtic castle, before, then they found 13 prehistoric castles buried one under the other. And you get to conclusion that 100,000 years ago, somebody showed up and grabbed the high point, the apex of the city, and they built a stronghold there, and they flourished, and their family flourished, and their tribe flourished until someone came along and knocked them off the hill. And it's been a non-stop, never-ending fight by the aggressive, most powerful entity, family, organization, municipality, tribe, whatever.
All for the hill.
For that one hill, going back since time immemorial. And, you scratch your head and you think, it seems like it's like just this never-ending
But doesn't that lead,
wheel.
if you just all kinds of metrics, that seems to improve the quality of our cannons and ships as a result. It seems that war, just like your laser eyes, focuses the mind on the engineering tasks.
It is that, and it does remind you that the winner is always the most powerful. And we throw that phrase out, but no one thinks about what that phrase means. Like who's the most powerful, or the most powerful side won, but they don't think about it. And they think about power, energy delivered in a period of time. And then you think a guy with a spear is more powerful than someone with their fist, and someone with a bow and arrow is more powerful than the person with the spear. And then you realize that somebody with bronze is more powerful than without, and steel is more powerful than bronze. And if you look at the Romans, they persevered, with artillery, and they could stand off from 800 meters and blast you to smithereens, right? You study the history of the Balearic slingers, right? And, you think we invented bullets, but they invented bullets to put in slings thousands of years ago. They could have stood off 500 meters and put a hole in your head, right? And so there was never a time when humanity wasn't vying to come up with an asymmetric form of projecting their own power via technology.
And absolute power is when a leader is able to control a large amount of humans that are facing the same direction, working in the same direction to leverage energy.
The most organized society wins.
Yeah.
When the Romans were dominating everybody, they were the most organized civilization in Europe. And as long as they stayed organized, they dominated. And at some point they overexpanded and got disorganized and they collapsed. And I guess you could say that, the struggle of the human condition, it catalyzes the development of new technologies one after the other. It penalizes anybody that rejects ocean power, right, gets penalized. You reject artillery, you get penalized. You reject atomic power, you get penalized. If you reject digital power, cyber power, you get penalized. And the underlying control of the property keeps shifting hands from, one institution or one government to another based upon how rationally they're able to channel that energy and how well organized or coordinated they are.
Well, it's a really interesting thing about both the human mind and governments. that once they get a few good ideas, they seem to stick with them. They reject new ideas. It's almost, whether that's emergent or however that evolved, it seems to have a really interesting effect, because when you're young, you fight for the new ideas. You push them through, then a few of us humans find success, then we get complacent, we take over the world using that new idea, and then the new young person with the better new idea challenges you, and you, as opposed to pivoting, you stick with the old and lose because of it. And that's how empires collapse. And it's just both at the individual level that happens when two academics fighting about ideas or something like that, and at the human civilization level, governments, they hold on to the ideas of old. It's fascinating.
Yeah, an ever persistent theme in the history of science is the paradigm shift. And the paradigms shift when the old guard dies and a new generation arrives, or the paradigm shifts when there's a war and everyone that disagrees with the idea of aviation finds bombs dropping on their head, or everyone that disagrees with whatever your technology is has a rude awakening, and if they totally disagree, their society collapses and they're replaced by that new thing.
A lot of the engineering you talked about had to do with ships and cannons and leveraging water. What about this whole digital thing that's been happening over the past century? Is that still engineering in your mind? You're starting to operate in these bits of information.
I think there's two big ideas. The first wave of ideas were digital information, and that was the internet wave, been running since 1990 or so, for 30 years. And the second wave is digital energy. So if I look at digital information, this idea that we want to digitally transform a book, I'm going to dematerialize every book in this room into bits, and then I'm going to deliver a copy of the entire library to 1 billion people, and I'm going to do it for pretty much de minimis electricity. If I can dematerialize music, books, education, entertainment, maps, right? That is an incredibly like exothermic transaction. It's a crystallization when we collapse into a lower energy state as a civilization, and we give off massive amounts of energy. Like if you look at what Carnegie did, the richest man in the world created libraries everywhere at the time, and he gave away his entire fortune. And now we can give a better library to every 6-year-old for nothing. And so what's the value of giving 1 million books to 8 billion people, right? Mm-hmm. Right? That's the explosion in prosperity that comes from digital transformation. And when we do it with maps, I transform the map, I put it into a car, you get in the car, and the car drives you where you want to go with the map, right? And how much better is that than a Rand McNally Atlas right here? It's like 1 million times better. Yeah. So the first wave of digital transformation was the dematerialization of all of these informational things which are non-conservative. That is, I could take Beethoven's Fifth Symphony, played for by the best orchestra in Germany, and I could give it to 1 billion people and they could play it 1,000 times each at less than the cost of the one performance, right? So I deliver culture and education and erudition and intelligence and insight to the entire civilization over digital rails. And the consequences of the human race are first order, generally good, right? The world is a better place, it drives growth. And you create these trillion-dollar entities like Apple and Amazon and Facebook and Google and Microsoft, right? That is the first wave. The second wave.
Do you mind? I'm sorry to interrupt, but that first wave, it feels like the impact that's positive. You said the first order impact is generally positive. It feels like it's positive in a way that nothing else in history has been positive. And then we may not actually truly be able to understand the orders of magnitude of increase in productivity and just progress of human civilization until we look back centuries from now. It just feels, or maybe I'm just looking at the impact of Wikipedia,
Right.
the giving access to basic wisdom or basic knowledge, and then perhaps wisdom to billions of people. If you can just linger on that for a second, what's your sense of the impact of that?
You know, I would say if you're a technologist, philosopher,